Kings Water Alliance activities, deliverables, and fees. And then we will get into, like I mentioned, the management zone implementation plan. Barb Dalgish from Ludorf and Scalmanini Consulting Engineers will speak specifically about the MZEP contents and the long-term drinking water solutions. And then again, Richard and Jackie will discuss the nitrate reduction program. As we're going through this, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or chat the question or use the Q&A feature as well, and we will go ahead and answer those questions for you. So just a brief overview of the nitrate control program was approved back in 2018. The notices to comply went out to Priority 1 dischargers back in 2020. It was about May of 2020 when the Irrigated Lands program received that, as well as all of the individual dischargers. And this program was developed to address widespread nitrate pollution in the Central Valley. It's a regulation that helps resolve the nitrate issues in the area, and it has three main goals: providing safe drinking water, reducing nitrate impacts to water supplies, and then restoring groundwater quality where reasonable, feasible, and practicable. So just a brief background on what nitrate is in case you're not familiar with it. If your WDR permit includes a provision for nitrates or for anything like that, then you are included in this program. If you are thought to be discharging and contributing to the nitrate issue, then you are a part of this program. And again, if you have specific questions about your WDR permit, that is a regional board question, and I can provide that information to you. We simply are provided a list by the regional board of who needs to be in the program. So nitrate is a contaminant that when it is above a certain level, which is 10 milligrams per liter, it is unsafe to drink. You cannot smell it, taste it, or see it, and you cannot boil it out of water. Its primary hazard is the body blood lacks the ability to carry sufficient oxygen to cells, and most at risk are infants, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and the elderly. Here's a diagram that our consultants have used previously to explain how nitrates could get into the drinking water. It's a chemical that is found in fertilizers, manure, septic tanks, as well as animal sewage, animal waste. It can be also naturally occurring in the soil, and it is also a man-made component. The rain and the irrigation water can carry it through the soil and into the groundwater. So you can see on the illustration that it could come from landfills, it can come from septic tanks, it can also come from fruit processors as well as wineries, wastewater treatment facilities, chemical processing plants, animal rendering plants, and the like. Again, the notices to comply for Priority 1 area, which I will show you what the Priority 1 areas are, were received in May of 2020. Priority 2 subbasins just recently received their notices to comply here at the very end of December 2023. There were two compliance options that were offered. Path A is an individual permitting, and Path B is a local management zone with other dischargers. So the picture on my right includes the Priority 1 management zones, and starting from the north going to the south, those are the ones in red on the map. We have the Modesto-Turlock, which is Valley Water Collaborative, the Chowchilla Management Zone, which is the Chowchilla Subbasin, the Kings Water Alliance, which is this Kings Groundwater Subbasin right here, and then we have the Cahuilla, which is this one, which is the Cahuilla Subbasin, and then the Tule area. So you may be in multiple management zones if you have multiple facilities. The groundwater subbasins in orange are the areas that just recently received notices to comply. And so starting up at the north, we have Yolo, East San Joaquin, Delta Mendota, Merced, Madera, right here. And then a part of the Kings Water Alliance, when we did our boundary, we included the Tulare Lake Subbasin as well, which is this orange one. Additionally, there are two areas in Kern that received notices to comply. If you would like to know what management zone you are in or what facilities your facilities are in, I included a link below here to find your management zone. So pathway B, dischargers working together to provide safe drinking water to folks, to reduce nitrate loading, to make sure that there's a collaborative effort. It's also a locally managed and overseen effort by dischargers. The solutions are tailored to the Kings and Tulare Lakes area. It's also more cost-effective and more flexible. So it being more cost-effective, we are all able to contribute to those costs that are reliant upon us, like such as the deliverables that I'll talk about next, as well as those short-term drinking water solutions, which we are currently providing to folks. Next, I'm going to get into the Kings Water Alliance specifics. So the Kings Water Alliance is the black boundary on the screen. It incorporates both the Kings Subbasin as well as the Tulare Lake Subbasin and a portion of the Kauai Subbasin. So we've got the Kings Subbasin in this mustard color. We've got the Tulare Lake Subbasin in the brown, and then we have the Kauai Subbasin. It is funded by nitrate dischargers. We typically have one annual meeting a year that updates you on the activities of the management zones. And we are also contemplating providing you with either a quarterly or a twice a year newsletter to make sure that you are updated on the activities of the management zone. And we are currently implementing those short-term drinking water solutions, which includes well testing and providing bottled water or going to a fill station for folks to get safe, clean drinking water. More specifically, it incorporates Fresno County, Kings County, and a portion of Tulare County as well. So again, the areas that we're currently providing services in are the Kings Subbasin, which is in gray, and the Kauai Subbasin, which is in peach. The notices to comply for the Tulare Lake Subbasin, which are in pink, just went out here at the end of December. This is a map of our current dischargers. So you can see that it is spread throughout the subbasins where we do have dischargers throughout. And in priority 1, we have approximately 75 individual permittees. And then in the priority 2 Tulare Lake, we will have about 20 permittees. And that also, and separate from those individual permittees, we also have irrigated agriculture, dairy, confined bovine, poultry. And again, examples of the dischargers that are required to comply with this program are wastewater treatment facilities, food processors, industrial manufacturing, wineries, composting facilities, and other animal facilities. We did have approximately 4 dischargers that successfully were approved for a Pathway A individual approach. That includes the City of Fresno Recycled Water Application Area, the North Fresno Wastewater Treatment Facility, as well as the Fresno Clovis Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility, and as well as the Clovis and Reedley Wastewater Treatment Facilities. Currently, the Kings Water Alliance Board has 7 seats to it. We are classified as a nonprofit that assists us with hopefully getting more grant funds. We have been successful getting some grant funds, and we continue to go after additional grant funding to keep the cost down for all dischargers. So right now we have 3 irrigated ag representatives, 2 dairy representatives, 1 poultry representative, and 1 representative from a winery. So we have currently 7 board seats, and our board chair is Cassie Chahan. Our vice chair is Mark McKean. Our secretary/treasurer is Rodney Camper. And as I stated previously, I am the board appointed executive director. Just a brief recap of our nitrate impacted areas, which are shown on the map in red. This is analysis that was completed in the previous deliverables that were submitted on our behalf. That includes the preliminary management zone plan and the final management plan proposal, final management proposal, zone proposal. Looking at the numbers from our analysis that was completed by the consultants, we're looking at approximately 7,000 wells that may be nitrate impacted. That includes the red group, which is approximately 5,500, and then the orange group, which is approximately 1,600. We offer our well services to anybody within the management zone that is on a private rural residential well. And so we will go out and we will test that well no matter where they are in the management zone, as long as it's a private rural residential well. We are approximately sitting at 45% of the samples that we have completed are coming back high in nitrates. We have, or we know the results of approximately 950 well tests to date, and we are supplying bottled water for approximately 500 individuals at this point, 500 residents. And we start them off with a supply of 5-gallon containers, approximately 6 of them, and those are delivered every 2 weeks. We also have 3 fill station locations, as well as the bottled water that we are supplying to people. So if people need safe drinking water right away, we have facilities for fill stations in Hanford, Kerman, and Dinuba. Additionally, the Kings Water Alliance continues to outreach to folks. If you look at the graphic on my left, you will see that the mailings is typically our most prevalent outreach activity. So when we send out mailers to everybody in the Kings Subbasin, we send out approximately 25,000 mailers. We have broken it down into 4 smaller areas where we are mailing out approximately 7,000 to 8,000 mailers. And we do that on we try to hit these smaller areas once a year with not only mailers, but also meetings, as well as other outreach, such as targeted Google ads or Facebook ads and the like. We've also completed radio and TV spots. We've been on ABC 30 The News. We've done a newspaper article as well as a newspaper ad. We continue to hand out flyers to dischargers to promote the Kings Water Alliance to get employees interested in the program. And we also continue on the right-hand side doing meetings and door to door. We go to door to door, and if we're in an area doing a well test, we will try to talk to a resident or leave a door hanger. We also go to a lot of food banks where we are providing the flyer. Any other kind of public event, we go to health fairs as well as resource fairs. But any fairs or activities such as that you may know about that you think the Kings Water Alliance should hit, we would definitely be interested in hearing. So kind of moving you through the timeline of our deliverables that we are required to do to the state. We formed back in 2020, 2021, after those notices to comply went out. In March of 2021, the preliminary management zone proposals were due, along with the early action plan. The early action plan was our outreach plan, as well as our targeted areas for the nitrate testing and bottled water program. It laid out the steps that we would go through for the analysis, as well as identifying those potentially impacted areas. From there, we started doing those well testing and the short-term drinking water solutions in May of 2021. After we received comments from the regional board on our preliminary management zone proposal, we did submit a final management zone proposal back in March of 2022. That then set the timeline in place for our management zone implementation plan, which includes long-term drinking water solutions, as well as a nitrate reduction plan, which the consultants will go through briefly. So that is the end of the presentation. That is my portion of it before I turn it over to the consultants to talk about the deliverable, the management zone implementation plan. Were there any specific questions before I turn it over to Barb? Right, Barb.
All right, thank you. Okay, Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Barb Dalgish. I'm a hydrogeologist with Ludorf and Scalmanini Consulting Engineers, and I'm part of the technical team assisting the Kings Water Alliance with the management zone duties. So today we'll talk about the contents of the management zone implementation plan. I'll talk specifically about drinking water solutions and give you more of a sense of how initial focus areas were selected and what that will involve in the future. And then I'll pass it on to Richard Meyerhoff, who will talk about the nitrate reduction program. So if you remember, Deborah just mentioned in one of her earlier slides about the 3 different goals of the nitrate control program. So the first one was providing safe drinking water supplies. The second one was reducing nitrate impacts to water supplies. And the third one had to do with restoring groundwater quality where reasonable, feasible, and practicable. So the management zone implementation plan, which you'll see that acronym MZIP a lot, that's the management zone implementation plan. And that's, again, the latest deliverable that we submitted back in September. It has to address all of those 3 goals, right? So the MZIP components to do that. So for the first one about providing safe drinking water supplies, we have an MZIP component that addresses all of the drinking water solutions that I'll be focusing on today. The second goal has to do with reducing nitrate impacts to water supplies, and that will be what Richard will talk about with the nitrate reduction program. And then there are a bunch of other items in the MZIP document that address managed aquifer restoration, as well as some other topics that I'll describe in the next slide. So this slide lists all of the management zone implementation plan contents. So we have the drinking water solutions are divided into kind of 2 major categories: the emergency and interim drinking water program and the long-term drinking water solutions. And then next we have the nitrate reduction program, which is a plan to achieve the nitrate goal, which is to cease causing or contributing to nitrate exceedances in groundwater. And then a bunch of other topics such as the managed aquifer restoration. There's a surveillance and monitoring program that has to be included. There's a discussion of how the MZIP will be implemented and how the Kings Water Alliance Management Zone will be complying with the nitrate control program and reporting back to the regional board on a regular basis. So there's a lot of information in the MZIP document, which is available online through the CV Salt's website. I encourage you to, if you're interested, you can dive in and there's tons to read, but if you just want kind of an overview, I recommend reading the executive summary, which is available in English and in Spanish. So you don't have to get into all the nitty-gritty details, but they're there if you want. There are also appendices that address more of the technical side of all of those components that I just described. So if you're really wanting to dive deep, you can do that. All right, so focusing on the drinking water solutions part of the management zone implementation plan, here's an overview of the emergency and interim drinking water program. So Deborah already mentioned, some of the activities that the management zone has been doing. If you remember, or if you're familiar with kind of the earlier stages of the management zone with the preliminary management zone proposal and the final management zone proposal, there was something called the early action plan. And that was a document that was first established and implemented in May of 2021. And so it has now shifted into what you see here, which is the emergency and interim drinking water program as part of the management zone implementation plan. But it's a lot of the same stuff. So it's a continuation of the early action plan, which means a lot of outreach, different tabling events, and back to school nights and all the things that Deborah kind of talked about briefly. But it also includes free domestic well testing, free bottled water delivery when those well tests came back high above the safe drinking water limit, as well as the 3 water fill stations that KWA operates. So right now, or I think last I checked, the Kings Water Alliance has been providing safe drinking water to over 500 households through the bottled water delivery program, and has distributed over 270,000 gallons of water through the 3 water fill stations in the last 3 years. So a lot of work has been going on. The MZIP now is a continuation of that. So that'll continue. But the bottled water delivery program is intended to be a short-term solution to bring safe drinking water to residents with nitrate problems in the management zone. The Kings Water Alliance is also committed to facilitating long-term drinking water solutions. And since we can't be everywhere at once at all times, we had to find a way to prioritize areas within the management zone to identify those areas that are in most urgent need of long-term drinking water solutions. So just to be clear and to remind you guys, any resident can apply for the domestic well testing and the free bottled water. And of course, anybody, doesn't have to be a resident of the management zone, can access those water fill stations and get free, safe drinking water at any time. So that is still going on in the background, but we want to look for and help facilitate long-term drinking water solutions to those areas in most urgent need. So we identified 8 different areas in the Kings Water Alliance management zone that we're calling initial focus areas, or IFAs. You might see that acronym in these slides. So I'll describe the selection process in the next few slides, but you can see on the map on the right, you can see the different areas that we've identified. So we've done some preliminary characterization of each of these areas to learn more about the number of residents and domestic wells that are in those areas. And we also started looking at public water systems that might be operating nearby. So we've established milestones to help guide the long-term drinking water solutions process for these 8 initial focus areas, which I'll describe in a few slides as well. So the management zone implementation plan document also contains a long-term drinking water solution work plan. So if you're curious, you can check that out. It's one of the appendices. And that provides an overview of all of the different potential drinking water solutions and talks about the challenges associated with each. So this will include traditional and non-traditional solutions and different funding opportunities that we might pursue to help facilitate these long-term drinking water solutions. So how did we find those 8 areas, right? These initial focus areas. We took a science-based approach to help prioritize the areas so that we could really kind of drill down and figure out what areas were in the most urgent need of long-term drinking water solutions. So we looked at all of the different characterization elements on the left side of this slide. So we looked at what the ambient nitrate concentrations were, if there were any trends in the groundwater quality data. We looked at all these other things, including disadvantaged communities and severely disadvantaged communities, nitrogen loading, any locations of bottled water deliveries, because we thought, hey, maybe, if the management zone already has contact or a relationship with some of these residents, they might be more open to working with us to find some long-term drinking water solutions. But it turned out, we kind of filtered down all of that characterization into 3 main criteria. So we looked at the locations of disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities. We looked at the density of domestic wells and the population in areas where nitrate was high. And we also used local knowledge to tell us more about the different communities in the management zone. So using that, we put all of that information together and identified 8 initial focus areas. So you could see them here: the Easton area, the Raisin City area, South Sanger, South Selma, North Reedley, South and West Dinuba, North Dinuba between Reedley and Orange Cove, and then the Orosi and East Orosi area. So when you look at all those together, it represents a total population of almost 15,000 residents About 13,000 of those are located in areas of elevated nitrate levels, which means areas where nitrate is not necessarily above the MCL or the safe drinking water limit, but it's high and it could potentially exceed it in the future. So we included those areas of nitrate levels above 7.5, and the safe drinking water limit is at 10. So just to be a little more conservative. In terms of domestic wells, this translates to almost 2,000 domestic wells, with about 1,400 of those located in areas with elevated nitrate. So what are the next steps? Well, a key component of the Drinking Water Solutions program is ongoing outreach and community engagement. Throughout the whole process of initial focus areas and facilitating long-term drinking water solutions, the King's Water Alliance will continue to do the free domestic well testing, like I mentioned, the free bottled water delivery, and operate the water fill stations. However, outreach efforts that began during implementation of the early action plan will also continue. So we're not just going to focus on those initial focus areas for our outreach and everything else. Like, we're still outreaching to the entire area. But the image on the right side of this slide helps illustrate the long-term drinking water solutions approach. So you can kind of see the cloud on the top right. That represents all of the different potential drinking water solutions that we can consider. Some of these solutions will be more feasible than others, and some potential solutions will be selected or kind of narrowed down, all while attempting to find suitable funding and all while soliciting community engagement and participation. The King's Water Alliance is dedicated to working with impacted residents to select and implement a drinking water solution that is supported by the residents that will rely on them. So we're not just going to go in and say, you must do this specific solution, because they need to have some say in that if they're going to have any buy-in. So during this process, again, King's Water Alliance will continue to outreach to all areas, but we're also going to target and focus some ongoing outreach to the initial focus areas. So this slide contains many different drinking water solutions that can be considered. The circle or wheel on the left shows possible drinking water solutions for public or state water systems. And then the wheel on the right is more geared towards private domestic well users that have nitrate issues. So I'm not going to get into each one of these little pie slices or axles of the wheel, but I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about them, they're all described in more detail in the Management Zone Implementation Plan document and that work plan appendix that I mentioned. But just to give you an idea, the solutions range from interim solutions in blue on the top right to long-term non-treatment solutions in yellowish orange on the left, and long-term treatment solutions, the bottom green, and long-term non-traditional solutions in purple. So there's a lot of different things to consider. And then we did set up some milestones. That was a requirement of the Management Zone Implementation Plan. So we set up milestones for the long-term drinking water solutions program. The first and arguably the most important milestone is that outreach and engagement component, where we will try to solicit input, local input on what solutions are most important to pursue, both by residents in the initial focus area and then continued outreach through events in the overall management zone. So within the first year of implementation of the plan, we'll need to determine which public water systems in and around the initial focus areas require further evaluation. So that means that we'll look into how each public water system in the area is doing, if they have a nitrate problem, and then perform an evaluation to see if they would be suitable for potential drinking water solutions, such as consolidation or expansion. So that would mean, if a public water system exists and has the capacity, they could potentially provide water, safe drinking water, to residents that are now relying on domestic wells that may be contaminated with nitrate. Also, during this initial evaluation, we would be able to find out if existing projects are have already started or in progress that that are aimed at improving the water systems. So that's kind of the first and second piece. Then determining the feasibility of different solutions will begin in year 2 of implementation of the plan, and we'll establish a framework for the next steps at that stage. So that would include reviewing capital costs, funding opportunities, operation and maintenance costs, operational requirements, permitting requirements, and kind of all the things that go along with that. And we would be soliciting stakeholder input at all stages of that. So we're hoping that long-term drinking water solutions for the initial focus areas can begin within the first 6 years of plan implementation. So in year 6, we would plan to establish a second round of priority areas. So right now we have 8 initial focus areas. In year 6, we would hopefully try to identify more places and more locations to kind of repeat this process over again, with the goal of, providing safe drinking water to more and more people for the long term. And that's it. So any questions before we move on to the nitrate reduction program? Someone will have to help me because I can't actually see if anybody is asking any questions.
I'm not seeing any raised hands or any questions through our chat.
Thanks, James. Okay. All right. Well, then I will mute myself and pass it on to Richard.
All right. Thank you, Barb. And you'll be controlling the slides, I assume? All right. Okay, as been noted by Deborah and then Barb, there are different components to the management implementation plan. And Barb just finished talking about a big one, which is to address the safe drinking water goals of the overall nitrate control program. What we're going to talk about most of the rest of this presentation is a nitrate reduction program, which is the program that affects the dischargers themselves that are participating within the management zone. So I'm going to start us off and talk about some of the components for different types of dischargers, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Takeda, my colleague, who will also talk about the components that affect what we call the non-Chapter 15 dischargers. So first off, some big picture items. When we developed the overall program, we wanted it to be sector-based so that the program is tailored to the different types of dischargers. What might work for growers is going to be very different for dairies, for a wastewater facility and the like. So the program, there's 5 basic components of the overall program. There's a specific program to each one of these sectors. Each one of these programs has its own compliance activities. So they are dedicated to the individual types of permittees. Within each sector-based program, so whether you're irrigated agriculture, you're a dairy and the like, there are different components, but they're common to each of the programs. So you can look at each one to see comparatively, if you're interested, what are the different components. And those specifically are, there's a segment that talks about a preliminary nitrate loading estimate, kind of a baseline, what is happening now. That was a requirement to include in the management implementation plan. And some of you, particularly individual dischargers with your own permits, may recall being reached out to assist with that component. And Jackie will talk about that part in a little bit. Then each sector has its own milestones. So again, we tailored them to the needs of particular programs, and we're going to share what those big picture milestones are to provide a means to show the board that we are, first of all, in compliance with our program, but we're making progress with the intent to meet the nitrate reduction goal, which is to no longer cause or contribute to an exceedance of a nitrate water quality objective in groundwater. And that's what we're focused on doing by meeting those milestones. Each sector also has very specific implementation activities with a schedule. To use the terminology of the regulation, these are called interim milestones, but it's just another way of saying things that need to be done over time along a schedule. Of course, with a program like this, we have to talk about how are we measuring compliance, and we want to talk a little bit about that at the end of this section today to be sure we understand what is permittee compliance, because you all have permits. versus management zone compliance. And so we'll talk a little bit about those issues. And then very importantly, at the end, talk about a little bit about reporting requirements, which is a significant component of the implementation program. It's the mechanism by which the board checks in, or we check in with the board is probably the way to say it, to show that we're meeting the requirements of the program that we agree to, and that we are meeting the terms and conditions of our overall the portions of the nitrate control program that we've committed to. Some of that reporting may require input from different sectors at different times. And so we want you to be aware of that. There may be requests for information down the road. So next slide, Barb. So quickly, how did we go about developing the program? I've already told you it's sector-based. So on the right, we have the sectors that were developed. There's the irrigated ag portion. There's a dairy portion. We have a separate one for combined bovine feeding operations. There's a poultry section. And then there's the non-Chapter 15 program. These are those that have individual WDRs. And so we've given you a list of types of facilities that are typically included in this program. When we developed the program, our focus, of course, is to meet the goal of the program for this element, which is to reduce nitrate loadings so that ongoing discharges, that's what's occurring today, do not cause or contribute to exceedances of water quality objectives. Now, the regulation allows up to 35 years to comply with this goal, as long as there's appropriate justification for the length of time requested, and recognize that even though we may request a length of time in the MZIP, and if the board approves that, and understand what I'm going to share today is proposed, the board has not accepted it yet. They're still reviewing the documents. But let's assume they accept it. There's still a need to periodically demonstrate to the board that we are meeting the requirements of the program. And so this periodic review will be ongoing, where the board can look and say, yes, you're meeting what was required, and therefore you may continue on your program. If over time something's not happening, there's milestones not being met, there's interim milestones not being met, the board does have the right to modify the plan and change the what we've proposed as our compliance deadlines. In developing the plan, we basically followed a three-step process. That's the green boxes at the bottom. First, we worked with representatives of industry, or we worked with individual dischargers to estimate a current loading to groundwater to the best that we could with available data. Use the collective information to develop nitrate reduction goals, again, tailored by sector, and then set up a schedule of implementation over the long term. One thing that's important to recognize is there are other management zones. As Deborah showed you a map earlier, we did coordinate with other management zones in the development of this plan for the Kings Water Alliance to be sure to understand that, so what's being required for growers in the Kings Water Alliance is no different than what's being required for growers, say, in the Cahuilla management zone or the Modesto management zone. So sectors are working collectively towards the same goals over the same period of time. It's just that you're in different management zones. We also work with representatives as needed to, again, be sure we had the best information going forward. Next slide. Okay, so what we're going to do here is just very quickly go through the different sectors, give you the highlights. As Barb mentioned, the MZIPs are very long. There's a lot of information in them. There's a main document. There's also appendices. And we've referenced here in the figure each of these slides for the different sectors, the key places to go look for information if you're part of that group. And so if you want to read more about irrigated agriculture, this will tell you where you should go to do that. And I think at the end, Jackie, you'll have a slide that summarizes this information. So again, this is just the highlights. So first thing off, we started with a preliminary loading estimate for irrigated agriculture. We worked closely with the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, the coalitions, to be sure we were using the best data that's currently available through those efforts. We are using the approved groundwater protection values that have already been approved by the regional board, so nothing new. So we had a lot of good baseline information to develop a preliminary estimate of loading. The loading estimate is presented at a township scale. And if you're, again, in that program, you're familiar with that because that's how current compliance is being implemented through that program. No change with that going forward, at least that is the plan. The reduction program itself, again, the reference there, we work with the coalitions. You can go to an appendix NRP1, which is the designated one for irrigated lands program. That has all the details of the program there. But we're going to narrow down to some key highlights. These last few bullets on this picture here is that first and foremost, there will be a need to improve nitrate applied removal data collection. Currently, the focus is on high vulnerability acreage within this area. The managed zone implementation plan expands that so that all acreage, low or high vulnerability, will need to collect this data. Then over time, you currently have existing groundwater protection values. These will be updated over time using the newest data as it comes in, and this will help support evaluations of compliance with the management zone implementation plan over time. So you'll currently, the program starts off with the existing protection values. These will be updated as needed over time, which is already built into the irrigated lands program. We're just going to piggyback off of that going forward. As you can expect to be enhanced outreach and education to growers, because we'll need to keep the local entities informed as to what's needed to be done over time. Next slide. So for each of the sectors, we have a very simple chart that's in the plan that illustrates what the milestones are. So these are big picture milestones. And then within each of these milestones, there are a lot of interim milestones that need to be implemented over time to meet these big picture milestones. So currently, the proposed MZIP says that the percent of fields and acreage, and it says priority 1, but in the Kingswater Alliance area, need to be within the acceptable applied removed ratio range for that particular crop. Now, our understanding is quite a number of growers already meet this goal, but the intent is that by year 20, so from the beginning of implementation out to year 20, to have all growers within the Kingswater Alliance meet this particular milestone, 75% by year 10. As we talked a moment ago, currently compliance within the irrigated lands program with growers is on a township basis, whereas we're going to use that. The percent of townships within the Kingswater Alliance need to meet their protection targets that have been established for their areas, and all of them by year 35. So we're requesting to the board to have the entire 35 years to have all townships meet this particular milestone. But note that by year 10, 50% of the townships are expected to meet, 75% by year 20, et cetera. So we will be moving it at a rapid pace here in the early years to get as many townships meeting this goal as quickly as possible. Next slide. So for dairy facilities, we again went through a process of developing a preliminary loading estimate based on the best data we have, working with the industry, provided some information on the slide there, some of the types of information. If you're really into the details, again, we encourage you to take a look at the reference appendix on the slide. We then work with the Central Valley Representative Dairy Monitoring Program on developing the nitrate reduction program itself, and the reference to the appendix is provided there. The most important elements of that program are the first 2 bullets there, and that is to improve the process and methodology for data collection, to do better at measuring nitrate loads from dairies that affect groundwater quality. So there was a recognition early on that this is important. We need better data to really understand what's happening at the individual dairy. So that will be a key element early on. Second is by 10 years out from the beginning of implementation, to have all dairies within the Kingswater Alliance achieve what we're calling zero whole farm manure nitrogen balance, which working with the industry say will be a lot of work, but that is a significant goal, is to achieve that balance within the 10 years. Now that's, well, you'll see this is end of MZIP phase 1. The MZIP program is phased by 10-year intervals. So that is a key step for that program. Beyond phase 1, so past year 10, we do not have any detail in the document regarding what will happen with regards to specific interim milestones. And one of the reasons we did this was because there's a lot of ongoing activity at the State Water Board, and which will then affect the Central Valley Water Board. And eventually an updated dairy general order is expected sometime in the near future. And so rather than get ahead of that, what we've done is built in that by the end of the phase 1, which is around 8-9 years, but before year 10, there will be an updated dairy nitrate reduction plan developed. That's part of the MZIP that will identify what happens beyond year 10 in terms of milestones. So next slide. So that's illustrated very simply here in the document that shows that the key is to focus on the first 10 years to achieve this zero whole farm manure nitrogen balance. And again, the industry is going to work with the individual dairies to move this along to achieve this goal. Then there will be a new set of milestones for years 10 to 20. That's the second bar. And ultimately, all dairies will need to be fully in compliance with the nitrate control program by year 35. That's the current proposal. Next slide. Confined bovine feeding facilities, there again, preliminary loading estimate was based mostly on research that's already been done with earthen corrals, came up with an estimate of current loading based on the facilities that are, at least what we know about these facilities. Again, worked with the industry to develop the best approach going forward. And so I'm going to drop to the bottom of the slide here. So what we've done is developed a program that distinguishes between two types or groups of facilities that are permitted under the general order for confined bovine feeding facilities. Those that are classified as limited time or limited population operations, they have already, if they meet that designation, they're already classified as a low threat to groundwater, and therefore compliance going forward will focus on establishing a new bovine quality assurance program that will apply to all these facilities, which is a certification program similar to what goes on currently with dairy facilities. But this certification program will be designed to be able to demonstrate to the board that yes, these facilities are meeting all the requirements of their permit. There are some facilities that are full coverage, meaning they don't meet the low threat designation. They do have to do water quality monitoring, and they will be required to develop ultimately what's called a nitrate reduction work plan, which is to tell the regional board how they plan to comply with the goals of the nitrate control program. This is to develop a tailored program specific to the facility, and it will have a timeline in which it needs to be developed and ultimately implemented per direction by the board. Next slide. So what we've done is recognize is that facilities that are low threat, which is the top bar there, it'll take a little bit of time to develop the quality assurance program. Again, the industry will work with the representatives of the bovine facilities to do that. And then that program has to be approved, and then it needs to be implemented, and certification needs to occur. We've given a 15-year timeline, at least the proposed MZIP proposes 15 years to achieve all confined bovine facilities in the Kings Water Alliance be certified that they are in compliance with their permit. For any full coverage facilities, they will have this full 35 years, but do recognize is that there's more details in the program. There's a nitrate reduction work plan that will need to be developed, that will need to go to the regional board. It will need to be approved, and included in that approval will be a timeline to demonstrate why do you need maybe out to 35 years. Maybe you can achieve compliance at a sooner time interval, but that will be determined through discussions with the board. Next slide. And then poultry is somewhat similar to confined bovine feeding. There are 72 facilities currently in the Kings Water Alliance, but all are categorized as low threat, meaning they meet the threshold for what's considered a de minimis impact at most to groundwater. They don't even have to do water quality monitoring. So there is no estimate of current loading in the MZIP because there are no data from which to create such an estimate. We're going to treat these facilities similar to the low threat confined bovine feeding facilities, recognizing that if they are in compliance with their permit, then their impacts to groundwater should be de minimis or non-existent. So dropping to the bottom, these low threat facilities, likewise, will have to work with their industry reps to develop a poultry quality assurance program, very similar to confined bovine. It'll have to be approved by the board, and then it requires a certification for each facility to demonstrate that they're in compliance with their permit. Currently, all facilities in Kings Water Alliance are these types of facilities, so that's where the focus will be. There's always possibility that over time there will become some other types of facilities established, like a full coverage facility. That's again very similar to the setup that we did for the combined bovine facilities. And if there are full coverage, they too will have to develop the nitrate reduction work plan, work with the board on their timelines, et cetera, on how to achieve compliance. Next slide. And so I'm going to focus, the top line is the most important one here. Since all facilities currently in the Kingswater Alliance are low threat facilities, they will have, again, out to 15 years to be certified under this new quality assurance program, which allows time for establishment of the program, get its approval, et cetera, and get it implemented. And next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jackie Takeda. She spearheaded the effort to develop the program for the non-Chapter 15 facilities, and she will take us forward.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jackie Takeda. Pardon my voice because I'm still fighting a cold I got over the weekend. So for this slide, I'll discuss the non-Chapter 15 program sector. So Deborah's to do the preliminary nitrogen loading estimates. Deborah sent out the initial data request back in November of 2022. And then about spring of 23, I had correspondences with most of you either by email or by phone call. When I was reviewing the data you guys had all provided. The data you guys had provided in the data request was existing data that you had been collecting per your waste discharge requirement, your WDR permits. And I want to say thank you again for all of you that did respond to the data request and for answering all my follow-up questions during that time. So to then when we looked at the estimating the loading to the groundwater, we did look at the total nitrogen concentration in the effluent. We also looked at the effluent flow volume, and we also looked at the acreage of the disposal area. For facilities that were not currently required to monitor for total nitrogen, we used a surrogate facility to determine that preliminary estimate. And a surrogate facility would be one that has a similar type of operation or a similar waste discharge process. The technical team, then on behalf of Kingswater Alliance, we had presented the methodology to the regional board back in April of 2023. And in about July of last year, I reached out to all of you to review your summary for your facilities permits and also your potential nitrogen loading rates. And for some of you, we also had scheduled meetings to discuss your summary some more because they were either more complicated operations. And again, I want to thank you everyone for that to help with getting all those summarized and then also responding back to me. We then summarized all the 74 facilities preliminary nitrogen loading estimates into pounds per acre per year. And those are found in the MZIP in table 5.6 for Kingswater Alliance. Next slide, please. So then the key program elements, similar to the other sectors that Richard referred to. So for the non-Chapter 15 programs, they can be found in the MZIP and Appendix NRP 4 in Table 4. And we had grouped these into 3 categories, and those were based on the facility size, your potential groundwater impact, or even the facility's location to a disadvantaged community or severely disadvantaged the DAC or the SDAC areas. And so that's how we categorize them into the three groups. Most facilities in the group 1 category, they tend to have a larger preliminary nitrogen loading rate, or they have a larger area of impact to the groundwater. The group 2 facilities, they're generally lower than the group 1's impact to the groundwater, upper zone groundwater. And then facilities in group 3, those are primarily limited to wastewater treatment facilities that are serving the disadvantaged communities. More data collection is going to be needed so we can update the preliminary nitrogen loading estimates that were done in the MZIP, and that was to be used to support compliance with the groundwater protection targets. So each of your facilities, you will need to prepare a facility-specific nitrate reduction work plan for regional board approval. And your nitrogen reduction work plan submittal date, those will vary based on your group characterization, which I'll get into in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, each of your facilities, you guys will need to prepare the facility-specific nitrate reduction work plan for your facility. And the work plan should lead to compliance with the nitrate control program goals and also contributes to the overall management zone compliance. Due to the various types of the facilities, some are privately owned, some are publicly owned. Some facilities, they can probably reach compliance sooner in a short period of time compared to others. And those could be due to either local regional planning efforts. There may be extensive public outreach efforts, especially for publicly owned facilities, and then for a facility to be able to secure funding to provide the necessary upgrades. So the work plans, they have to evaluate the compliance timeline for your facility based on the proposed compliance approach. It will also need to justify the time that you're needing to comply with the nitrate control program. And in the next slide, I'll present the milestones for the non-Chapter 15 program. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a similar bar table that Richard went through for the other sections. So what we propose in the top section is the percentage of facilities to have an approved nitrate reduction work plan. So for group 1 to have 100% compliance of all the facilities in about 10 years, looking at 15 years, what we propose for group 2, and then 20 years for the group 3 category, facilities categorized in group 3. The bottom half of the chart is for the percentage of facilities compliance to meeting the applicable targets to meet their management zone groundwater protection targets. So for this one, we have group 1 is to 20 years, group 2, 25 years, and then group 3, the maximum of 35 years. And so if you haven't had a chance to review this schedule, then we recommend that you review the appendix NRP 4, especially table 4. We recommend that you do take a look at that to see more details about that. Next slide. So this is looking at, there's 2 types of compliance approaches. So this one is going to be the management zone compliance approach. And then in the next slide, I'll go over the individual permittee compliance approaches on there. So this one is looking at the MZIP includes a section that you focus on establishing your approach for a collective management zone compliance. And our intent is to use existing township-based compliance, which has already been implemented from the irrigated ag sector through the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, the ILRP. So the figure to the right, it shows an example of the various types of permittees that could be given in a certain in a township, which is a 36 square mile area. So in the figure to the right, you can see the green area is predominantly the irrigated ag parcels. It looks like to the west, we got some dairy bovine facilities. You got some non-15 facilities to the north. And then if you look very closely, in the north, there is a small poultry facility identified as a yellow box on the figure. So we'll need to update the existing approach so that it considers all the permittees discharging in a given township, not just looking at irrigated ag. And the MZIP includes a schedule with the interim milestones to develop the management zone compliance assessment approach. Next slide, please. So for looking at the individual permittee compliance activities, so for the irrigated ag, the dairies, bovine, and the poultry facilities, we expect the MZIP requirements are expected to be incorporated into the general orders. However, we're not still sure on how that timing of the process will work. It's still kind of unclear for that. So for now, we're asking that discharges under these general orders that you continue to implement your regulatory requirements per your existing general orders and to do any coordination with your respective coalition or industry reps. For the non-Chapter 15 program facilities, similar to the other ones, the other sectors, it is expected to be incorporated into your individual permits. And again, we are still not sure on the process from the regional board on when this will be rolling out. So since you don't have a general order, so we ask that for the non-Chapter 15 program permittees, that you continue implementing your respective monitoring and reporting requirements that's stated in your permit. But we also want to let you know that it's likely the regional board may revise the monitoring requirements to support the MZIP implementation. And it'll be most likely revised for the facilities that are either have older orders or have very limited monitoring requirements. We expect the compliance clock, that would probably start when the requirement is effective in your permit order. And again, we don't know when that will occur yet. So the Kingswater Alliance, they will be coordinating with you regarding any MZIP related activities requiring your input, such as supporting and preparation for the management zone reports. So when the time comes that the Kingswater Alliance will be reaching out, we're just kindly asking in advance that you promptly respond when your input is requested. Next slide, please. So for the management zone reporting, this one shows the annual, the 5 and the 10-year reports, reporting timeframe in the figure to the right. And so the annual progress reports, it'll include all the interim and emergency drinking water activities and the long-term drinking water activities in the initial focus areas that Barb had mentioned earlier. And then they'll also need to discuss the nitrate reduction program activities by each sector. Those will be going into the annual reports. And we expect to start working on that since maybe the first annual report by the end of 2024. The 5-year reports, this is a regulatory requirement, and it'll include everything from the annual reports and then also sector-specific reports on implementing the nitrate reduction program requirements. And then it'll be also including a status report of the other MZIP program areas. The 10-year reports, it will include all the content from the annual and the 5-year reports, and then also include another regulatory requirement is to include by sector the best management treatment practices and the treatment technologies. So for the next slide. So in summary, this is where you guys can find more information. So on the Kingswater Alliance, if you guys are not really familiar with that, there's the website to Kingswater Alliance. And then within the website is also the MZIPs are in there. Again, like Barb and Richard mentioned earlier, it's a very large document. So this kind of table right here summarizes each of the sectors and where you can find more discussion, especially the appendices on the preliminary nitrate loading estimates. There will be appendix with NL designation in front of it for the development of the nitrate reduction program, the NRP. That's also an appendix under NRP. And then the schedule for the implementation of the nitrate reduction program. Those are the respective tables that you can find for each of your sectors. So then we hope that you have reviewed the MZIP and appendices mentioned here already. Again, if you haven't done so, we would highly recommend that you take a look at and review them. And let us know if you have any questions on that. Next slide, please. So for the next steps of the MZIP approval process, we hope to know more in about the next 2 months. That's around the time frame where we're hearing that the regional board will hold a public hearing, possibly in April. And we expect during that time, the regional board will be discussing the MZIP approval process then. So hopefully that'll also be completed by June 30th. And the Kingswater Alliance will be keeping updates, providing updates as needed. So for the next steps, we also do want to let you know to expect correspondence from the KWA as needed so we can support the implementation. And then if you have any further questions regarding this, please do reach out to Deborah about it. And I think that wraps up my presentation. Are there any questions? If not, I'll turn it back over to Deborah.
Yeah, Jackie, I'm not seeing any raised hands or any questions.
Okay, thank you, James.
Thank you, Jackie. Much appreciated. That wraps it up for the annual Discharger meeting. Unless anybody has any questions or comments or any thoughts on either a quarterly newsletter to provide updates or a twice a year newsletter. If that's something that you guys would be interested in, please let me know in the chat or raise your hand to give me an idea of how many people would be interested in that. And any other communications that you guys may want, please just let us know. All right, if those are hands raised for newsletters, that's great. I've got the countdown. If those are hand raised for questions, please let them stay up and I will unmute you. All right, Karen, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi there.
I just wanted to see if we could get all the nice presentations we saw today. First of
Yeah,
all,
I'll get you the slides, and we are gonna make a copy of the presentation available. Give me a few days on that, but we'll make it available on our website.
perfect. And also, I just want to point out, I do see a question from Andrew.
Yes, I answered Andrew's question. So there are various things with the county that have to do with septic tanks. The technical consultants that are on the call right now are specifically for the MZEP. So if it involves any kind of upgrade to a system, you would need to consult your own technical consultant to determine what could possibly assist with your nitrate issues or the nitrate discharge that you're discharging. But there are other opportunities, Andrew, for consultation and perhaps there is a county program that deals with septic systems that one of our other dischargers has successfully gotten onto the county LAMP program. Those are things that I can discuss with Andrew or anybody else who has septic systems. Anybody else have any specific questions related to any of the presentation? All right, you guys, thank you very much for any questions or comments that you may have after the presentation. Please give me a call or shoot me an email, and we'd be more than happy to discuss it. Everybody have a very good day. Thank you.